What up? What up? What up? What up? Welcome to another Tam Talk here on the channel. Thank you guys, everybody, for joining me live. I greatly appreciate it. This is something that a lot of people have asked about. And that is, yo, how do you build this character? Anybody have a sweet Moneta list? Yo, anybody playing All Might? How do you do this? And I, the old saying, you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. You teach a man to build a deck, and he goes and wins nationals. That is the goal today. That is the goal. I want to teach you how to build a deck, or how at least I build a deck in the MHA Card Game. It's like 9 or 10 steps, and there is some liberties you're allowed to take with like the idea of how to build the deck. But this is how I do it. This is how I do it. Very classy saying. Thanks, Jam. Also, welcome to the stream, man. So, how to build a deck. Step number 1 is you got to know how to play. Here are 4 video thumbnails. If you just go type in how to play the My Hero Academia collectible card game, you're going to find all of these great people. In fact, right now, Tice House of Cards is my content creator of the week! MHA creator. And then you should be able to find him a link to his YouTube channel. If you have not, I'm going to leave a link to all of these creators down in the comments down below of the YouTube video. So you should definitely check them out. But if you don't know how to play the game, if you don't know the mechanics of the game, it does you no good to attempt to build decks. You have to know how to play the game first. If you don't know how to play the game, come watch me on a stream and we can talk through it. Go watch one of these videos, go to your locals, and I'm sure that they can teach you how to play. This card game is blowing up, and so people everywhere know how to play. But first thing you gotta do is you know how to play. If you don't understand the value of cards or like what they're doing to represent the game, then it doesn't work. Step number 2, pick a character. I have a video on my channel all about here's how you pick a character and like what each character's kind of play style represents. So you can go, and I'll leave that description down in the bottom. In the description down below. But more importantly, UVSUltra.Online is a website that you can go to right now and go and look up every single Universes card that's ever existed. The My Hero collectible card game has these super sweet Universes card game backs because they are a part of a larger game. And so learning to pick your character and who you want to do, I've got a ton of steps, whether it be like, yo, this is my favorite character, or I like how this character plays, or I opened up a box and these are the ultra rares that I got. Totally fine. Whatever your reason is, you have to pick a character before you can start to pick a deck. Some people take and play this differently, where they find an attack package that they like, which we'll get to, and then they like go through and they make the deck first, and they're like, what's the best character to play this package? I think personally, if you are brand new to deck building and you're having to watch this video, step 1 is pick a character and then let it filter down, because it limits the options of the cards that you're allowed to play, and the cards you're allowed to pick on UVS Ultra. And so I think picking a character is the first thing you have to do, besides like knowing the mechanics of the game. Up next, how do we win? I put on the screen just a bunch of cool ultra rares, but really this is just like picking your attack lineup, looking at all the attacks that you can play under your specific symbol that you've picked from your character. They have 3 symbols, pick one of them, and being like, yo, I want to play the all symbol, and so I'm gonna take and look at all of the all cards that I like. And the reason I bring up UVSUltra.com is because it has a deck builder inside of itself. And you can just put everything into a big list and be like, yo, I want to play. We'll just use All Might as the example because like he's just the coolest character. I want to play All Might under the all symbol. Let me take all these cool all attacks and shove them into my deck. And then once you like have a big pile of attacks, normally like I get done deck building and I've got 30-40 attacks, and that's too many. That's too many, which we'll get to. You have to figure out which cards you're looking to play, and really just specifically look at the text box of the cards, right? Look at the stats. Like this Detroit Smash is a 6 mid for 6. It's got EX2. It's got powerful 2. It hits like a truck. Discard your hand. Discard momentum. Grab 3 momentum from your hand. Insane. I'm playing All Might. I get to draw 3 extra cards. That's crazy. Look at the card text and be like, yo, these cards are hype. These cards are cool. These cards are good. These cards are bad. Figure out which ones you want to put in your deck and which ones you don't. And just really figure out like what's my big win condition. Next, you've got support cards. These are your actions and assets. I always do these second because I need to know these are the most dynamic, engaging cards that you have besides attack cards. Like foundations sit on your board and they stay there and they're always there, but these are your trap cards. These are your surprise cards. These are your powerhouses when it comes to like assets. Like assets are so good, they can't be committed to pass checks. And so trying to figure out what abilities on these blue and green cards that I want to play matters. Like go beyond being able to go and pick up this amazing Detroit Smash whenever I want to is like a great ability. And if that's a thing that I want to play, jam it into your UVS Ultra deck. Up next, you've got your foundation base. Going through, looking at and figuring out what card text is relevant, which one synergizes with your moves. Like we're playing All Might, and that character says your punch and your fury gets bonus things, and so card text that is relevant to punch or fury, maybe that's the card text that we want to put on our foundation base, which is the core of the deck. Your attacks win you the game, and your foundations make that win more consistent, and that's how I feel about it. Any monkey can just sling orange cards and like hope it works out, but to really play the game, you have to have this good solid foundation base that pushes your attack lineup up and over what it is that your opponent's doing, and or have a foundation base that stops what my opponent's doing. Like some of the cards that I see here, like planning ahead is minus damage. That's not helping my game plan. That's purely a defense card. That's to make sure that I don't die, so that I can keep playing the game. What's their plan? An insane disruption card. And we'll get to what those words mean here in a second. But yeah, being able to understand like what foundations look good in your deck, and my initial suggestion to you when it comes to foundations is make your foundation base of your deck almost exclusively me cards that say my deck gets better, as opposed to trying to put in cards that say your deck gets worse. The reason that I suggest that whenever you're first building a deck is you have to make sure that your game plan works, and you have to see which of those cards you're allowed to cut. Thank you, Rootswag. Appreciate it. And you have to figure out which cards you're allowed to cut in order to make your game plan still happen, but then put in just a smidge of defense. Up next, check your stats, and here's where like the heavy lifting of the deck goes. Normally, 9 times out of 10, whenever you build a deck, you can walk away with like a pile of 100, 120, 200 cards, depending on like we get 2-3 sets down the line, and when we've doubled, tripled our card pools. Yeah, you're gonna have a lot of cards, a lot of options to play with, and so now from here we have to check our attack ratios. The normal attack ratio is however big your deck is. You want just under a third of your deck to be attacks, right? So if I'm playing a 60-card deck, normally I like to run 19 attacks. That is just under a third. You're allowed to scale even lower the higher hand size you go, because they see more cards in a turn. You get to see, like on turn 3, you've seen 3 extra cards than your opponent, as well as checked 3 extra cards than your opponent, if you've played every card out of your hand, we're assuming. So as we are drawing up, and that doesn't include any draw power that we have inside of the deck. That doesn't include anything like go beyond to go and pick attacks up out of our discard pile. Making sure that your ratios are attacks to non-attacks, roughly a third attacks and then 2/3 non-attacks. Depending on the kind of deck that you're playing, you're allowed to mess around with these ratios a little bit, and to be honest, all of the numbers that I have ever crunched have all been on 60-card decks and not the 50-card decks that we're allowed to play in My Hero. And so those numbers are still the same, but I have to use the 60 card as a reference, because normally, like with the 50 cards, I don't know what the third is off the top of my head. It's what, 16 attacks, 15 attacks. 16 might be even too many. The next thing that I do when I check my stats is I make sure that my block mods are even. I run 18. You run 18 attacks in a 50-card deck since Partial Mulligan. It's a great point. I make sure my block mods are relatively even, and what I mean by that is I don't want to go into a deck and have 4 low blocks, 27 high blocks, and 23 mid blocks, right? You're going to find some decks that like to overload some zones, and so to make sure that I have rounded out my edges and give myself the best chance in every single game that I play, I like my block modifiers to be even if the Foundation's main job in the deck is it checks a 5 and has a low block. It checks a 5, it has a high block. It's a spam Foundation, which we'll get to next, and it's a good mid block. I think that those are totally valid reasons to run a card in the deck, even if its card text is not relevant all the time. The cool thing about the My Hero card game is every card is useful. Every card is useful. You just have to find the correct deck to put it in. I know a lot of card games, they print a lot of chaff, a lot of bad cards, a lot of cards that just are bad. They're just bad cards. You'll play them in your draft, and you'll play them in your sealed pool, and then you'll literally throw them away when you're done because you'll never put them in a different deck. And that's not what My Hero's like. Honestly, to a detriment. I think this game's really hard to play Seal. I think this game's really hard to play Draft. It's not designed for it. It's designed for this competitive. Designed for this competitive deck construction. That is what the game's made for. And so that you'll have the most options, the most fun, the most whatever with it. Spam Foundations. A lot of times, obviously, the more powerful your foundations are, the higher difficulty cost they are. Your 3 difficulty foundations are very, very crazy good. But the most important turn of the game for both players is both of your turn 1s. And you need to be able to build out a healthy foundation base in order to make sure that you can continue to play the games 2, 3, and then so on. Once you get to about turn 3.5, turn 4, your foundation base should be relatively even, and that's where the game kind of evens back out. But the first 3 turns of the game has such a huge player 1 advantage that if player 1 builds 5 foundations, player 2 builds 2 foundations, player 1 is going to win the game. It's like a 90% chance that they win. Something absolutely terrible would have to go wrong check-wise, or something terrible would have to go wrong for player 1 to lose that game. But if player 1 builds their 4, player 2 builds their 4, I now have not only the ability to block a couple moves from the turn 1's second turn, or player 1's second turn, but also I'm allowed to push back and be slightly aggressive on my turn because of draw up to your printed hand size. So having foundations that have low difficulty so that you can play them out, even if they don't have great effects, every foundation in the game has commit, increase your check by 1. And so that is great. They are working on things to alter the advantage of going second. I don't know where you've heard that, but that sounds wonderful. That sounds great. Was that on like a Joffice or something? That's very cool. And then my last thing that I check inside of my my stats is bad checks, and that is 2 checks and 4 checks currently in the game, because this game is honestly a lot of math. It's a lot of, if I check a 5, what happens? If I check a 3, what happens? And you need to know how often you're going to be checking a 2. How often am I going to be checking a 4? Because that surprise, that randomness of checking the top card off of our deck is really important when it comes to doing block math or attack string math. It's very, very important. And so just understanding, I'm not saying you cut your bad checks. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying understanding that you are playing bad checks, and understand that what is the likelihood if I draw none of my 2 checks and none of my 4 checks, and I play this 3 difficulty foundation, what happens, right? What's the likelihood that I'm going to check a 2? Understand that, and then play accordingly. And just this is more about, like, as opposed to like changing your numbers, this is about you checking your stats. And then once you've done this, I suggest running through this like 3 or 4 times. Check your attack ratios, make sure your block mods are evens, check your spam foundations, check your bad checks, and do this like 3 or 4 times before you even get into a game, and make sure that you are at least somewhat happy with where things are. Step 7 is card jobs. This is something that I do, and I think this is really important when it comes to a deck that I really care about. Is I check my cards jobs. I made an entire video about my deck analysis of my All Might 3 deck and the 4 jobs that I give cards of aggro, defense, flow, disruption, and making sure that I understand what primary job a card has whenever I am building my deck. And so, and you can check that video out, and I go to a really in-depth explanation there. But basically, there are 4 types of cards: aggro, flow, defense, disruption. Cards can share all 4 of these card types if you look at them properly. But if you had to put them into a pile of at least 51% of this is how I want to use this card, what do your piles look like? Are you wanting to play a defensive game? If that's the case, then your defense pile should be the biggest pile. Are you wanting to play a game that I end my turn with all my foundations ready and a bunch of cards in my hand? Then your flow pile should be the best. Do you want to end the game on turn 2? Well, then aggro should be the best. And figuring out what my piles look like, because that will tailor how you have to play the game, because you can't really force your pile of cards to do something that they're not designed to do. We have the flexibility of a card game on the deck building screen. We don't actually have flexibility inside of the game itself. To a degree, you can move some stuff around, but aggro cards are going to aggro, defense cards are going to defense. Step 8, probably the most important step, is play games. Play lots and lots of games. Lots and lots and lots and lots of games. My suggestion to you, if you are brand new and this is the first time you've ever built a deck, and this is the first time that you've ever built a deck, this is the first time you've ever built this character, I would suggest playing, honestly, like a dozen games with it. Don't even change it. Don't mess around with it. Literally, play 12 games in a row. Play against a bunch of different characters. Play against everything before you make any cuts, any changes. As soon as you start getting up and bigger and better, I had an interview over on a TCGU with Phil Birch, and I was like, yo, how do you figure out when to make changes in your deck? And he goes, sometimes I change halfway in game 1. So I'll play 0.5 of a deck, 0.5 of a game, and then scoop my cards up, go fix the deck, and then come back and play the game again. If you're watching this video and you're you're like, wow, I'm taking all these notes, don't do this. If your deck does not work on the first game, that is okay. It is possible that either you played it wrong, or you have played against an opponent who knows how to beat your deck, or you're playing against a character that you've got a bad matchup again, or you're playing it, there's so many things that could be factoring in, and it's not the fact that you made a bad deck, it's the fact that you did this thing. A point there is, I played, whenever this is gonna age me, I played Zhang Hua against, I believe, your current UK national champion, Jacob Johnson, whenever the Soul Calibur set came out. And I played Zhang Hua, and he played Taki. And Zhang Hua has this really cool ability that she's allowed to play attacks on our opponent's turn, a thing that's not available inside of my hero. And she works off of 3 damage moves, and she stuns out my opponent's board on their turn. And Taki clears the card pool on either player's turn. So my attack fizzles, and it doesn't work. And I thought Zhang Hua was like the worst character in the whole game, and I put her aside, and I shelved it. Jacob Johnson, the champion, was playing Taki. I was playing Zhang Hua, and I put that deck down. Years later, like 2-3 years later, Jacob ends up going and winning nationals with Zhang Hua over in the UK. And so, it wasn't the fact that I was playing a bad deck. It was the fact that I had a bad matchup, and I played literally one match of that deck, and then I put it down. You have to play a bunch of games. You have to, because of how card games work. You gotta branch out and realize that you're gonna have some bad matchups, and that's what sideboards are for, which we're not even gonna talk about, because if your main board doesn't work, your sideboard doesn't work. Abiku into Kamui Woods, yeah, right, yes. And then lastly, share your results. Championships are not won all by your lonesome. They are team efforts. I cannot think of a single person who has gone and won anything inside of universes and has been a lone wolf, single agent. Share your results. The shameless plug here. If you want to join my Discord, there is !Discord in the Twitch chat right now. There's a link to it in the description down below. Be a community, be in the community, and see what other people are doing, right? See what other people are doing, compare your results, just share your knowledge. High tides raise all ships. And so understanding that you can't be a champion alone, even if you don't have a designated play group, because of the age of the world that we live in. You have to do that. Yeah, Tam, share all my 3 deck with me. I think it's over on my Patreon, but we can talk about it later. Yeah, just share your results. Make sure, hey guys, I'm having a really hard time with this matchup. What do I do? Jump into a group chat. I know in my Discord, I have each character broken down by their individual character. So if you want to see Ochako 1 results, if you want to see Ochako 2 results, go jump into those chats and go talk about those specific characters. This matters to me a lot. The absolute best thing about universes, and the absolute best thing that is going to happen from the My Hero card game, and I mean this, is the community of people that we have cultured here. We have cultivated. The people that exist in this game are so amazing to each other, and you will hear story after story after story about how great these people are. And as soon as events start kicking up, it's going to be magical. But none of that happens if you don't hang out and you don't share with everybody. And that's it. That's the entire thing. We can run back through just really quick. You got to know how to play. You got to pick a character. How do you win? The support cards to support your character and your attacks, your foundations that are going to be on the field for the longest time. Making sure that your stats are really good. Your card jobs, if you want to. This is a nerdy thing that I do. Play games, a bunch. Play a bunch, and then share your results. Twitch chat, do you guys have any questions about anything deck building wise? Is there anything in here that didn't make sense, or anything that you think that I missed? I do want to have a conversation with you. You are live with me over on twitch.tv/TamCardwell. It looks like not. Looks like I did such a great job. All right. Read all the cards. Hey, reading cards is really important. Oh, here we go. Okay, here we go. All right. Do you ever make meta considerations when deck building in this game? 100% of the time. 100% of the time. Think about who is the big dog, and then figure out what. And this comes with playing games, right? I think that it is more important if you are learning to deck build, to just deck build and not care about the meta. Once you then have done deck building stuff and you go back to your card jobs, you then can understand which of your cards are doing what in what matchups, right? There is a video that I did over for TCG University where I sat down with the team's champion, Piglet, and he's one of the smartest teams competitors that there is. People beg for Matthew Curtis Turner to be on their team, and he shared with me the playbook. And basically the playbook was, what do you do inside of every single matchup that you could possibly have? And so they would roll the dice and pick a character and be like, yo, what does my All Might 1 deck do versus Mina? What's the game plan going into that matchup? And they sit down and they talk about it. And if they can't figure out a game plan already inside of their deck, they go and they make changes inside of the deck to then shore up that matchup. And then they do that same thing with the next matchup. And they go through that for every single card. And you can take and do that not based on just the character, but then you can base it based on character and symbol. And then you can do a character symbol package, right? Because like the all deck could be a punch deck or it could be a weapon deck, right? The good deck could be a flash deck or a punch deck. The void deck could be a throw deck or a kick deck. Yeah. What do you think about overloading attacks to one directions like all highs, all lows? I think all highs, all lows only works if you have, if your opponent gets unlucky and they don't hold the correct zones. I think that the biggest mistake that people get into is they overload zones. And then they're like, I don't understand why I lost. As soon as you choose to overload a zone, like the idea of like Lomu, right? Or Bakulo. I don't have one for Shigaraki. Is they take and they overload the low zone, and that is trying to prey on your opponent, just not drawing low blocks. Because Shigaraki essentially can turn one attack into two attacks. If I play my third move and you don't have 3 low blocks to block me, I essentially got in for 2 attacks. Right? With a burn 5 or double my damage. I think in characters like Ochako, if you exclusively overload high, you're not going to win the game. I believe that. I believe that Ochako should be playing charge attacks from high, mids, and lows. If you play exclusively high attack Ochako, unless you're playing something silly like the Meteor Shower loop deck that turns 2 attacks into 5 attacks, because there's no way that they held 5 high blocks. Unless you're playing something silly like that, then overloading that zone doesn't work, right? My personal opinion is I would much rather play all the zones and mix up what's coming or what's happening in order to do that. And you actually get to I'm really not gonna like the Mina High on Life deck. I'm sure I'll like it perfect handle. I think that mixing up the zones and making my opponent actually have to play a game with me, as opposed to just being like, oh look, I found 2 high blocks. I guess I'm not gonna build those because I look at their discard pile and there's exclusively highs in there. I'll play everything else out. All right, I get to block 2 things. You're not killing me this turn. I think that's a really important aspect of the game. Proxy cards to test with, yes or no? I think the proxy cards is fine as long as the people you're playing with are cool with it. I would much rather proxy cards on Tabletop Simulator than proxying cards in a deck. Just because it is way easier to proxy cards on Tabletop Simulator and feel good, and your opponent still feel okay playing with you, rather than being like, oh, this card is like, it creates more feel bads in person. But you have to figure out it with your play group. That's a real answer. You don't need help with my ratios for Ojiro. We could talk about it, Punk. Yeah, we can talk about it, whether at locals or some other time. You're not really like my Mina. If there aren't any other questions, I'm gonna bring this video to a close. Yeah. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. Thank you for watching this how to build decks. This is not a very in-depth. This is very much a high-level look. If you want more in-depth question, I think that the best thing to do is to ask people, but don't ask, how do I build this deck? Ask about specific scenarios inside of the deck. Do you think this is a good card? How do you feel about this card interacting in this? Because if you're not coming to the table anything deck building wise, then I feel like I can't actually help you. And I think that's a really, really important aspect, which is why this is such a high level, because I want you to figure it out yourself. I want you to know how to build a deck as opposed to just being handed a deck. Once again, feed them in a fish, go win a championship. Anyways, thank you much for watching, you guys. I greatly appreciate it. Remember, check out all the links in the description down below. Go join my Discord if you want to be a part of the community. And as always, thank you much for watching. I wish you well.